Dear guests of the Female Guides Requested podcast, happy Wednesday. This is your host Ting Ting from Las Vegas. On the first episode of the new year 2025, we have Laurie Watt as our guest. Laurie has just been awarded the Best Guide of the Year by the AMGA. Laurie fell in love with hiking and skiing in the mountains as a kid, but it wasn't until she had sent her kids off to college that she was able to fully embrace mountain life. While raising her family, she also cultivated a 32-year career in physical therapy. In 2006, she moved to Switzerland with her family for her husband's job. Living in the Alps quickly reminded Laurie of her love for adventuring in the mountains. After returning to the States in 2011, she expanded her skill set to rock and ice climbing. Once the kids were off to college, Laurie decided to make a major career change and committed to becoming a guide. Through training, mentorship, and many days out, she is progressing through the American Mountain Guides Association's rock, ice, and alpine disciplines. Laurie works full-time as a guide for Mooney Mountain Guides in New Hampshire, guiding rock climbing, ice climbing, and mountaineering. In the summers, she travels to the Pacific Northwest and guides on the glaciers of Mount Baker. She offers women-centered programming in rock, ice, and mountaineering. In addition, Laurie also works as a climbing coach for the Holderness School climbing team. In this episode, we dive deep into how Laurie cultivated a great mentorship from the side of a mentee, how she challenged a common narrative on aging and used the life skills she accumulated from being a PT and a mom to enrich guiding, and how she sustained the physical demanding guiding career. Laurie, thank you so much for coming to the Female Guide Requested podcast. And I'm very excited to have you, and congratulations to being voted as the best guide of the year of the AMGA. Definitely, people love you as a guide.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll take a shortcut. I will let you just quickly introduce yourself to our audience. And then I would definitely ask you a lot of questions.
Perfect. Yeah, so my name's Laurie Watt. I live in New Hampshire, and that's where I'm based. I work now full-time as a guide for Mooney Mountain Guides and been working for them since 2017, guiding rock, ice, mountaineering, and then we guide on Mount Baker and the Twin Sisters Range in the Pacific Northwest in the summer. Kind of late to guiding. It's my second career. Got into it in 2017 and absolutely love it.
So basically, when you start working, you work for Mooney Mountain Guides.
I did. My story starts with them and continues with them.
Awesome. I would definitely love to hear their stories. So you say do you mind just letting the audience know? Because you are a very special case. All the podcasts I heard is you start guiding really late in your life. Yeah. And do you mind telling us how late that is?
Yeah. So I got my single pitch instructor certification in 2018 when I was 52 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm 59 now. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So next year is going to be a big birthday year.
Yep.
I won't call myself exactly that much younger. I'm slightly younger, but not that much. And then were you, say, outdoorsy or athletic before when you were younger? Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of the cliff notes of the story were when I was young, as 7, 8 years old, I had an uncle who lived in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And he would take me hiking and backpacking as a kid, and I loved it. But then I got into more organized sports like soccer and was living in suburbia. And so I got distracted away from the mountains and the woods and more into organized sports. So I played soccer through college and skied and volleyball and a few other things, but soccer was my primary sport. And it wasn't until, so I played soccer in college and then kind of did what the cultural expectations were, meaning after college, I got a job, had a career as a physical therapist, got married, had 2 kids, and got very distracted from the mountains. And it wasn't until my kids were late elementary school that I started to remember how much I love the mountains and started to hike again. And then the big pivotal event that happened was in 2006, my husband's job moved us to Switzerland.
Oh.
Yeah. And I wasn't able to work as a physical therapist there. I couldn't get a work permit, and I also didn't have a good grasp of German. So I had a lot of time on my hands. So I would drop my kids at school in the morning and go hike in the Alps all day and then go pick them up at the end of the day. And this was an incredible privilege, but it reignited my love of the mountains and reminded me how much I loved being in them. And up to this point, it's really just been hiking and skiing. So we lived in Switzerland for 3 years. I hiked a lot. I started to look to bigger mountains. And so in 2009, I hiked Kilimanjaro. Then we moved to London for 2 years, and that sort of put a damper on the outdoor aspect.
Right, London.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really cool city, but I'm not a city person. And then when we moved back in 2011 to New Hampshire, I was determined to stay involved in the mountains. So that winter, I took an REI course. It was a winter summit of Mount Washington. And the guides who were contracted for that were Mooney Mountain Guides.
I see.
That
can I? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I interrupt you a little bit? So I keep a note here. So basically, you spent 5 years in Europe.
Yes.
And then at the first, maybe early years, you were pretty close to the Alps.
Yes.
And because you couldn't work, because no working visa, so basically you were full-time mom, but then you could explore the outdoors.
Yes.
I see. Okay, great. So that in 2011, you moved back to New Hampshire.
Yes.
Did you pick up your PT job back? And yes.
Yeah, it was Massachusetts, actually.
Okay.
Yep. And so, yeah, I moved back and I resumed my physical therapy practice. I had my own private practice and was doing that.
And then, so in 2011, how old were your kids?
When we moved back, my son was 18 and my daughter was 16. No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My daughter was 14. My son was 16. So a freshman and a junior in high school.
Right. Then I will assume they were pretty independent by then.
Somewhat independent, yes.
Okay.
Still, as anyone who has teenagers knows, like needed a watchful eye, especially my son, because we moved him back his junior year of high school. That transition was pretty bumpy.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah, it was pretty bumpy. And so I needed to be around and present, but they didn't really want me around that much. So I was able to spend some time driving to New Hampshire and doing a lot of hiking on weekends.
I see. And sorry for all this question. I have no experience raising kids, so that's why. Yeah. Great. And then you sign up for a winter Mount Washington. Wow, that's not easy.
No, and I had never I never really hiked in the winter. Even in the Alps, I would do some skiing, but even skiing in the Alps, like the temperatures and the conditions were not what they are on Mount Washington
Mm.
typically. So I wanted to expand my skills and thought that might be a good way to do it. So did Mount Washington, and it was a day like many up there. It was a whiteout snowstorm with lots of wind and no visibility, and pretty much just what we signed up for.
I totally understood because I used to live in East Coast and I was quite involved with AMC, the Appalachian Mountain Club. And we were talking about hiring guides back then to do presidential traverse, which is notoriously difficult because the condition, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. On that one, you're above tree line so much and exposed to the elements for the bulk of that hike. So yeah, it is no joke.
Right. And then usually Mount Washington has record wind
Yeah.
speed. Yeah. So above tree line is so exposed, no shelter, crazy winds, and of course all other type of hazards there. So it's not small feat.
Right.
Yeah. And how did it go?
It went really well. Despite those conditions, I just fell in love with it. I wanted to be out there. I wanted to be in the mountains. I wanted the brutal conditions. I wanted all of it. I just completely fell in love with it.
Oh, now I feel like I'm soft. Just imagine it. It's not like I've never been in the alpine environment, but still, now I feel like, Red Rock make me soft because it's like warm and then even occasionally we do have windy conditions, but not the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just introduces more elements to cope with and more challenge.
Yeah, and what do you think that in you or your personality or your childhood, whatever that is? I'm just trying to dig this like why you just love that hardship. Like, what
Yeah.
do you think?
That's a good question. And I've thought about it a lot, both in the context of Mount Washington, but also in terms of climbing and guiding. And it's the sort of mental gymnastics that is required to put yourself in situations where there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of risk, and to learn what internal resources you might have to manage those things. And that process of challenge and self-discovery to me is incredibly compelling. To find out what you have inside and then to exercise those skills and those muscles to push further and further each time you're out there, each time you're in more adverse conditions, is just incredibly compelling. I learned so much about myself. I find it really empowering. And I find that it requires me to do some significant reflection on who I am and what I'm capable of.
Yeah, I really love the way you put it as mental gymnastics
Yeah.
because I can definitely relate, even though I probably not like you articulate all those thoughts, but I certainly problem solving is like the best part of just being out there. Or sometimes with the addition of say guiding, we have different people, then add some factors that we have to put it into the whole decision making process. Yeah, now I can understand why you're such a great guide.
Thanks. Yeah. And I mean, it's the same whether you are on-siting something in Red Rock or you're climbing at your limit in Red Rock or you're, on ice or in mountaineering or even just hiking, going beyond what you've typically have done. It still requires that same kind of exercise, that mental exercise, which is compelling to me.
I see. So you rejoin with your love to the outdoors.
Yes.
And when did the seed of becoming like working in as a guide that kind of start?
That's a really good question. And I think probably in that period after we moved back from Europe, I was in the mountains more and more. I was trying things new and different. So I started to rock climb a little bit. I started to ice climb. I started to just dip my toe into some of these other worlds of climbing or ways of climbing, and just falling in love with each and every one of them. And I was in a particular meetup group called Nature Girls. We were just a bunch of women who liked to hike. We liked to go climbing at the gym. We did different things. And we had hired Mooney Mountain guides for a couple of different things. We'd asked them to take us rock climbing, ice climbing. And one day we asked them to do a navigation course for us. So we're out in a park doing a navigation course, and we were led by one of their younger guides. And at one point I had sort of naturally felt like there was this natural guardrail, and I had just seen it like a stream to help us navigate. It just sort of occurred to me without a whole lot of help. And he looked at me, and this young 24-year-old, and said, "Have you ever thought about becoming a guide?" And in that moment, I allowed this seed of a thought that I know I had been germinating for a while come to the surface. Because even though I kind of had been thinking about it, there was so many obstacles. I felt like my age, my gender, the fact that I didn't have a long climbing history or experience. And so even though I had been thinking it, I didn't allow myself to really embrace it until he said that.
So basically, before he asked you this question, it may be deep down you were flirting with this thought.
Yes.
But you wasn't bold enough to make it strong enough so for you to pursue it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So now you have a second opinion.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And the thing is, at that point, my kids were getting older. They were about to head off to college. I had been doing physical therapy for a really long time. And while I loved the career, it wasn't providing me the same excitement as it once had. So kind of those life events of looking at an empty nest and a second act in life, I had been germinating the thought of what could I do in the outdoors, because I love being outdoors all the time. But yes, it wasn't until this young man, Andrew, said, "Have you ever thought about being a guide?" that I actually said to myself out loud, well, actually, yes, I would love to do that. But I still thought it was improbable and impractical.
That's interesting. I think it's pretty natural that you have doubts. Let's put it in that way, because I think for anybody who want to, say, leave an established career, say, even though you might not feel that it's even though you feel it might be time to change, but still there's a lot of uncertainty, unknown, to leave the stability behind and then pursue something really new. And also also the general perception is like, okay, in the States, it's like white young men are the norm or the majority of the guides, right? And so what were the biggest doubts back then? And how did you punch through?
So the biggest doubts were my age and my gender, for sure. I just didn't know if it was practical at all. Because yes, as you say, the only guides that I had seen were young and male. And I was neither of those things. So I had punched through some of that. In 2015, I had continued to push my hiking and climbing limits. So between the time I got back from Europe and the time I decided to do this, I had gone on a trek in Nepal. I had gone on a trek in Patagonia. I had done a course on Denali. And in 2015, I had signed on as a guest for an attempt on Denali, West Buttress. So I had been pushing my physical limits and exploring that, and was beginning to feel like, okay, I can do some of these things. But still, the doing them as a guest and doing them as a guide was a huge hurdle. So after Andrew made that comment to me, I wrote an email to the owner of Mooney Mountain Guides, Alex, and I asked him point blank, I said, if I wanted to do this, is it possible? Is there a space for me in guiding at all? And how would I go about doing this? And Alex very kindly wrote back a very lengthy email that was totally supportive and also really clear. Like, if you want to do this, you have a lot of work to do to do this. And he laid it out. He laid out training and coursework and first aid courses and, the whole sort of thing. But he did say, without a doubt, if you do this, there's room for you in this industry and even within his company.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah. And so Alex really has been the most empowering force behind my doing this. He became my mentor. He became a partner in climbing, and now I work for him. And we've done lots of trips together. And he has just been my biggest supporter through this process. And I credit my being here really significantly to him and his support.
I'm actually very curious about this relationship because I was approached by, also she says she's an older woman, even though I don't really think she's that old. And she also want to be like a rock guide. And she told me obviously what is her current status and all that. And to me, to be honest, I think it's great. And there's always space. And then to me, it's like, look, there's no impossible in this thing. And then I'm like honest with them, and then this like requirement and all that. I was just like, but in order to help this person, to mentor this person, so I was just like wondering, what's the most needed thing if you found in the past as a mentee to you? Like, I think what kind of requirement you need. You need to train, you need to climb, you need to do all that. But there's something beyond all those things, I think.
I think one of the most helpful things was to have someone to check my perceptions against, and bounce them off. So whether it was my perception of my movement skills or my perception of my risk assessment, to have someone that I could share my thoughts or my feelings with about these things and get as much as you can an objective response or another side of that. I feel like that is one of the most helpful things, because self-awareness is so crucial in guiding, right? And in any mountain sport, having self-awareness. And that's, you have your own self-perception, but I think pairing that with other people's perception of how you're functioning and combining that really helps improve your self-awareness. And that, I feel like, was the most helpful thing I got. Because you're right, I can learn how to tie knots from YouTube, right? I can take a woofer class, but how I'm actually performing out there on the cliff or in the mountains is really important, to have that accurate self-awareness. And so having someone you trust help you with that, I think, is crucial.
That's right. Yeah. And I think it's a little bit similar to guiding, that sometimes the guests would think they are better than they are right now. And some people would think they are worse than they are right now. And then as a guide, you kind of help them because you have way more experience than them. So kind of help them to get a perspective, because the better, just like you said, self-awareness, the better decision you can do out there in this risky environment. So the less mistake you're going to make. Right. So it's in a way, yes.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think also it helps you really be willing to look at your weaknesses and work on those and function within your limitations. And that's so important as a guide, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I'm always just trying to steal like people's opinion secrets. So, when I mentor my mentees, I can do a better job.
Yeah. To his credit, Alex has a background in education. And there were a lot of times, and so his ability to teach me or either tell me something or allow me to get there by myself, like he knew exactly when to do which. And sometimes that's incredibly frustrating when you're like, just tell me what to do. And he might say, you'll figure it out, because he understood that at certain times having me go through the process of figuring it out was more important than just telling me what to do. It was more impactful and powerful. And obviously within risk mitigation. But I think as a mentor or a mentee, there are times when you show someone, times when you tell someone, and times when you just support them as they figure it out on their own.
Definitely. Yeah. And I love that approach too. I mean, obviously we don't want people to make critical mistakes, but I want to make sure that I give them enough space so they can make mistakes too, because mistakes are the best teachers, I feel. Yeah.
Right. I mean, when you really screw up rope management and it takes you 20 minutes to figure it out, you don't do that again.
Definitely. Yeah. That experience definitely has more impact than me just say, oh, look, you need to do step 1, step 2, step 3. Yeah. Definitely, for sure. As long as they are tied in, then I'm good.
Totally.
And then, so how long did this process take for you to say, yeah, I'm ready to be independent?
Oh, right. I don't think there was one specific day for me. I think that it was this very slow process of discovery and had lots of steps. So, I got my SPI certification in June of 2018, and up until, through that whole time, I had been shadowing a lot of single pitch days and things like that with different guides at Mooney. And then I continued to sort of have some supervision throughout that season. And then slowly it was this sort of agreement between Alex and I that as I started to feel more comfortable, we would discuss it. And what is this particular job? And how do you feel about it? And at this venue? And he would need to feel comfortable with me operating independently as well as myself. And so it started probably that fall of doing some very basic single pitch rope work. And then each discipline and each sort of venue, it would be a different process. So like that winter, I think I did some Mount Washington trips because I had done a lot with him for the previous couple years. Ice took a little longer, of course. And so the independence came in steps as my skills and my comfort and his comfort progressed.
Yeah. And for me, it's almost like you have this very great setup because you can shadow the courses that they offer. Because that's what I struggle with, because I think that's very important to, first of all, see how an experienced person run the course. And then gradually you get some autonomy under supervision. And then eventually it's like, okay, Laurie, you're good to go.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I found that not many newer guys have this type of chances. Yeah. So
I
what
think
do you
you're
think
right.
that why you got that?
Why do I think I got it?
Yeah. Because I know you are very you write email to them, and originally you probably already been guided for a few times by
Yep.
Mooning. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Right.
That's a really good question. I think that what I showed was the ability to contribute in positive ways as an observer, meaning I could certainly make sure people were belaying correctly. I might add helpful hints to the instruction that in different ways. So let me put this differently. I think that as we progressed, Alex and I, my other skills brought in from my life experiences, whether it was caretaking or teaching through physical therapy, I was able to apply some of those skills at very basic levels to the climbing environment. And it was a different approach and a different perspective than Alex may have had. And so I think that he began to see value in what I could offer, even as an intern or even as just an assistant, that made him feel really comfortable and in fact want me to be on some of those courses. I wasn't an extra person that he had to take care of or manage the risk. I could contribute.
I think that's a very good point. It's like, usually it's good to create a win-win situation, right? So, back then, probably, at your skill level when you just started, so Alice, I'm right now making a lot of assumptions, obviously, and then maybe just like, okay, I need to make sure that I also keep an eye on Laurie.
Right.
Okay. And then you contribute. Just like, wow, I don't know what his expectation is, but it's like not only satisfied, maybe you outperform his expectation. And now you solidify this relationship.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. And then it just grew with the more time that we spent together.
Right.
And then just continued to evolve as my skills evolved, his comfort level, and all of that. Yeah. It's been really an amazing relationship, mentoring and then working together. But I think you're right. I think that I'm really lucky, and many younger, newer guides don't have access. But perhaps this is the important point, is for those folks that need to be mentored or want to be mentored, is thinking about what can I contribute versus what extra work am I putting on this guide, who's already mentoring me.
I think that's a very good, I think we found a very good point here, because I certainly receive people who say, oh, can I shadow you? And I was like, look, I don't know you. And then you just ask this one sentence question.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I already have so many people I need to take care of. Yeah. And that day is not the day that I see you, because then it will be another person of responsibility for me. It'll be a lot of work. So I think that would be like, if you want to share with people, yes, you also say, hey, look, this is my credential. I'm very confident, or whatever, that trying to create a win-win situation. And I know when whoever just started is always hard. Right. It's not just like you just say, hey, can you take me under your wings? Right. But then we need to make you a very strong pitch.
Yeah. And in the beginning, I'll be really clear that I paid for that time of mentoring, just like you would for a day of guiding, because it was 100% work on his part. And then as my skills developed, we had a period where we did some bartering, physical therapy for guiding and for mentoring.
Nice.
Which, if people have other skills, that could be a really good way to work that out, is some bartering.
Right.
And then as my skills really progressed, then it was more of, I was able to go along and contribute what I could.
And I think that's also probably from, when you request that you are a quite mature adult, you have a lot of life experience. I think a lot of newer guys, they don't think that far.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So I
Yeah.
think this is very good. So,
Yeah.
you never know. I mean, even though you feel like you are late to this profession, but all those experience and you accumulate beforehand is gonna be very valuable.
And I completely underestimated that. I
Mm,
felt like I was starting from ground zero, just scratch zero,
right.
because I didn't have this history of climbing. And it isn't until recently, and then with the culmination of the award, that I realized, wow, all these life experiences and these skills that I had developed in other arenas, I was able to apply to guiding in really in just the way that I could, and it's made a huge difference in my career in guiding.
For sure,
But
you're unique.
yeah, and I totally underestimated that, and so it's kind of wild and exciting to have validation that no, actually, that's really good. We want that in this industry.
Yeah, and the thing is, we really need a diverse guy pool too, right? Different skill sets, and then sometimes that you need to even be, you just need to have a broader experience. So it really helps that you have other experience, and then you bring all those wisdoms in the guiding community. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it certainly has been really helpful in developing my return customers.
Mm.
People, and not everybody, obviously everybody interacts differently with folks, but the people that keep coming back to climb with me, I think it's because they value that side of me that I can bring to guiding.
And can you give me some examples of like what's the surprising skills that you didn't thought was relevant to guiding, but it was actually quite helpful?
So I think one of the biggest skills I have is and developed through physical therapy. When someone comes to you for physical therapy, they have an obstacle. They are not
Mm.
functioning because there's an obstacle. And that obstacle could be physical and or emotional, mental, or both. Someone who's had a severe injury, they have a physical obstacle, but often there's a mental or an emotional obstacle as well. They have lost trust in their body and confidence in their body. They have fear around something, or uncertainty. Their body didn't react the way they thought it would, or their body responded differently, and now they don't know what to trust. And so in physical therapy, I would work with people, obviously, to get that body part functioning better, but also to help them heal their relationship with their body
Mm.
that was damaged by an event, an illness or an injury. And guiding is similar to that. You take someone who now you're putting in this new experience outside of their comfort zone, and there are obstacles. There's physical obstacles, meaning maybe strength or movement or technique, and there's certainly mental obstacles, right? Fear, uncertainty, insecurity, all of that. And so I think one of my biggest skills is being able to recognize what are the obstacles and have the skills to address all of them, not just one.
Wow.
So, and especially the mental and emotional pieces, I feel like I have a lot of skills there that maybe other people with different life experiences don't have yet. That allows me to really meet people where they're at in a place of compassion and support, so that they can be vulnerable and move through their learning process, feeling supported.
I see. Yeah. So my imagination, because I visit PT
Yeah.
before, and then so obviously I visit PT, I already have this some type of frustration. And
Yeah.
then you probably need to deal with that frustration first to build trust with me, saying, because it's not just like, okay, I visit you the first time. Would you fix my problem? right? And then, but I also had this frustration. I wanted to be healed.
Yep.
Wow, that's like hard work. Yeah, the building relationship part. Usually clients, they come in with, I'm glad most of my clients come in with sadness. So it's like they're
Yeah.
sad. So typically don't have that frustration, but still the building relationship part
Yeah.
is there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you must see the frustration like when they hit their limit,
Yes,
right?
of course. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's about, okay, where's this frustration coming from? And what's the block or what's the obstacle? And how do I help
Mm-hmm.
them through that?
Wow. Yeah. Turns out that guiding is a very multifaceted career.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be. That's for sure.
Right. And then back then, did you have any vision of what kind of thing that you like to guide?
So I had very low expectations for myself. And I remember saying to Alex, I'll be happy if I just guide 3 Mount Washington hikes a year.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, being that most of my experience was in mountaineering and hiking, I kind of was focused on, okay, well, that's probably what I'll do. And so it's been this amazing discovery to find like, oh, I'm guiding multi-pitch rock and I'm guiding multi-pitch ice and holy cow, you know, and glaciers and all of it. So, yeah, it's been an amazing, and, you know, that's somewhat of a disservice to myself to put those limitations on me. Luckily I've been able to sort of discard those limiting thoughts as I move my skills up. But yeah, in the beginning I had very low expectations.
I understand though. I have those phases. Just like, oh, I will, if I'm like can climb like 5, whatever, I'm satisfied, right? And then just like, oh, actually I am right now. And
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm glad that even though you have low expectation, you still keep that, say, okay, it's possible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so, and when did you have an interest in technical guiding then? More like using ropes, I mean.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much from the beginning, you know, one of the things Alex had said to me in that very first email was that at least taking the SPI course and the exam as a very basic level of functioning, even if all you're doing is mountaineering or hiking, you need to understand rope work.
Okay.
And so he introduced that from day one, you know, and so I pursued the SPI. And once I kind of got a taste of trad climbing and climbing, I just fell in love with it like most people do.
Oh,
and then,
yes.
you know, you just want to do more. Just give me more all the time. And so then, yeah, as I just kind of pursued that, I decided it'd be really fun to also take people on the rock. One of my biggest joys is, and you must have some of this too, is, you know, you take beginners out and you walk them up to the cliff and they look at that cliff and they look at you and they're like, absolutely not. There's no way I'm going to climb that. And, you know, a half an hour later, they're at the top. And that look on their face when you lower them back down, where they have just done something they thought they would never be able to do. Like, that's an amazing thing to witness and to facilitate. And I feel like technical climbing gives the new beginner that experience even more than hiking or mountaineering, because it feels so improbable to the person who's never done it.
Yeah, especially climbing has this, well, it has real danger, obviously, but you also have this perceived danger that most people think, wow, it's like so dangerous and yeah, and all that. So
yeah,
definitely. Whew. So I know because you live in Northeast.
Yep.
So because the where you are, you have to guide different things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. To guide year round in New England, you really have to do rock and ice and mountaineering. And even with that, and lots of people do backcountry skiing. That is not currently one of my skill sets. But
Were you Are you interested in putting in your skill set?
I'm dabbling.
Yeah.
I grew up as a resort skier and I love skiing. I have a backcountry setup and I've been starting to do more of that,
Ooh,
especially because of the avalanche training that I've been doing. So I have been dabbling with that, but probably will not pursue that discipline in terms of formal training.
I
Um,
see.
but yeah, even guiding all those different things, there still are shoulder seasons where there's not much work to be had. So guiding year round in New England is a tough thing to make a living at.
I
Um,
see.
and
So
most folks have to supplement with something else.
are you saying that do you have enough work right now year round or you have to travel?
Um, I have a lot of work, but it's sporadic, right? Like there's about 6 weeks in winter where I could work every single day. But
Well,
but then like now there's really no work
I see.
for probably 6 or 8 weeks. And the same thing in the summer, like you could guide rock every day for 5 or 6 months. But the spring and the fall, it's really hard to be outside. The conditions just don't allow it on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm curious. So you have a PT background. You say you're 59-year-old. I'm actually 49 years old.
Nice.
Um, and I found that because the guiding thing is like sometimes you just work a lot straight, right? And I mean, even I talk to younger guys too. They say, oh yeah, they're tired too. It's not just like I feel that working like 12 days straight, I'm beat, right?
Yeah.
And so do you have any like strategy? Because we love this thing, right? We also want to protect our body, so to make it sustainable. Anything you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Being a physical therapist, one of the things that is really helpful is I have a good sense of my body and can sort of recognize stress and strain early before it becomes a
Mm.
real problem. And so I can usually, knock on wood, nip things in the bud before they become significant injuries that force me to take a lot of time off. As an aging athlete, definitely I prioritize sleep, nutrition, flexibility. It can
Oh,
be like,
flexibility.
oh yeah, oh
Huh.
yeah. I do a good stretching routine almost every single night. Um, and all of this helps me stay more resilient to
Yeah.
injury.
So interesting because I mean, I definitely prioritize sleep and nutrition. That's like so basic, right? So I'm curious about what's the flexibility comes in.
So when we do a specific sport repetitively, we are using certain muscles more than others. We're using certain ranges of motion more than others. And what happens over time is you create imbalances. Some muscles are way stronger than others. Some motion is way better than others. And by doing flexibility every night, I can try to balance that. And so I will recognize, oh gosh, this leg is way tighter than that leg, or these muscles are way tighter than those. When you have huge imbalances, that sets you up for injury. When
Yes. Mm-hmm.
when you have certain tightness in your muscles, that sets you up for injury, right? Like you have a really tight hip flexor and you're walking down one of those heinous gullies in Red Rock and your foot slips on loose rock and it goes way out to the side and now you've got a torn muscle because it was tight to begin with.
Yes.
So by doing flexibility every night, I help my resilience so that when I have those unexpected movements, I'm less likely to injure myself. And B, it helps me identify early, wow, you have a real imbalance here that you should work on to prevent injury.
Nice. Yeah, I like the way you put it as like early signs because you are a PT, so you can identify the early signs. Like right now, I feel like I'm a very good guide. So I can identify the early signs of like, then I just deal with it right then.
Yep.
Right. So I don't have to do rescue, say. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the exact same philosophy is you're just trying to keep an eye on everything so that it doesn't become a problem down the road.
Gee, I need to
Exact
have
same
that
thought.
skill.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say too, like I am still figuring out what my threshold is for guiding, like how many days a season is comfortable on my body. And I'm still figuring that out. And last winter I overdid a little bit. I was pretty fried by the end. So this year I'm trying to keep a better handle on that and also schedule in some more rest days, which is tough to do because, you want to get while the getting is good. But I find at my age, I can't guide 12 days in a row. Certainly not a certain kind of guiding. Now, a single pitch cragging day where most people are top roping, that's different, right? So trying to schedule different kinds of days that put different stresses on my body is super helpful.
Yes.
The other thing that I've done that is super helpful in New England or other places that have seasonal guiding is I have supplemented the traditional guiding work with academically based work. So there's a local boarding school that has a climbing team. And I work as a climbing coach. And that's every spring and fall. We go climbing like an after school sport and take the kids to Rumney 6 days a week for a couple hours. And it's not physically demanding work because some of these kids are amazing. They're putting the ropes up, they're leading, they're cleaning. I'm supervising and coaching. So physically, it's not a huge demand on me at all. And so by adding that in, it's paid guiding work, but it doesn't put a huge demand on my body. That really helps balance and allow me to work more with less stress on my body.
I see. Yeah. Kind of like plan ahead, diversify, and then know the physical demand, and then also good self-awareness, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good self-awareness. And that can be hard, right? Because you might have these days scheduled and then you realize I'm really tired and you don't want to cancel.
Right.
And that's where then I think we should ask ourselves as guides, like, how am I going to structure this day? If I'm not at 100%, if I know I'm tired, if I know I've got a sore shoulder, how am I going to structure this day to give my guests what they want, but still keep myself protected?
Yes. And how long have you been guiding now? Like how
So I
many?
started 2018. So
2018, 6 years
6 years.
ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still
And
feel like a baby.
okay. And then I'm wondering, so I know there are a lot of guys that got into this line of work because they just love spending time outside. They feel like it's great to get paid by, say, taking people outside, taking people climbing, whatever they love. And then they jump into the profession, found that, oh, it's different,
Yeah.
right? And did you feel that? And then do you have to adjust your expectation? Do you still love the way? Yes.
That's a great question. And I think that coming into it as a second career and as an older person, I've sort of avoided that trap. Um,
Oh,
I I got into, so, as a physical therapist, a lot of my work was teaching. As a mom, a lot of my work is caregiving. To me, guiding is teaching and caregiving in a different environment. So I knew I wanted to be outside all the time, but I knew I was still going to be teaching and caregiving, not just climbing. Climbing's the vehicle for me to do all those other things. But so I didn't fall into that trap that I think maybe younger folks do who just love climbing and they want to climb all the time. And this is a way to get paid and make it work. I knew that guiding for me was going to look different. And I actually, when I work with younger people now who say they want to get into guiding, I do kind of stress that it's not just climbing, it's teaching, it's instructing, it's listening, it's taking care of people. And if you don't like those things, you might not want to be a guide.
Yeah. I mean, this profession is, to me, is actually all about people.
Totally.
And then you just need those technical skills to help you with risk management and obviously the environment you operate in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I see it, is that I'm still helping people with their obstacles of physical and mental. And I'm still facilitating that process of healing and self-discovery. It's just now my environment is different. It's not a
Yes.
PT, it's not a PT office. It's a rock face or an ice face or a mountain.
Right. So you have, say, your existing skill set with a new skill set. You're doing maybe similar work, but in a very different environment. Yeah.
Yes.
So kind of give you a new perspective. Then yeah.
And
Great.
that's kind of how it worked best for me, because I came into it with so much of this history of doing this kind of work in a different environment. That's what I could bring to guiding. And yes, I had to learn all the technical skills and movement skills and risk mitigation and first aid and all that kind of stuff, which is super important. But the core of what I do was what I've always done. And I think that's what allows me to be really effective at the kind of guiding that I do.
I see. And I know that I can direct people to Mooney Mountain guides, obviously, but do you want to do a quick introduction of like what kind of guiding? Oh, sorry, my cat feeder just went off. So there was that noise.
Cats. I love cats.
Yeah. So because I make a recording for the cat feeder, I totally forgot about that.
I see them. I love cats. They're wonderful.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just that, so the audience knows that. What do you do?
Yeah. So I do a lot of beginner groups, rock, ice, and mountaineering. I do a lot of women's groups or women identifying groups. When I started in New England, there was very little, if anybody, doing that, just women's groups.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, in rock climbing or ice climbing. And so I started doing that, and I continue to do that every year. And now I'm beginning to get a lot more return guests who are moving through their climbing skills. And so I'm starting to do more multi-pitch kind of individual guiding at higher levels with my return guests. And that also coincides with my training, with my AMGA training, as I get more certified and more training and open up my scope of practice. But primarily, I'd say it's beginners and it is women's groups, but in the disciplines of rock, ice, and mountaineering.
I see. And then the area.
The area, mostly in New Hampshire, in the White Mountains. And then in the summers, as I said, I go out and I guide on Mount Baker in the Pacific Northwest in the Cascades. And I'm just starting to do some trips into the Twin Sisters as well, which is more sort of that rock, alpine, glacier, a little bit of everything.
Yeah. And I'm curious, how did your family react to your career change?
That's a great question. My husband, it's a very foreign world to him. He's never been a climber. He's a scuba diver. And to be honest, I think that it took me a long time to say it out loud to him because it felt so improbable.
Okay.
To be a guide, to say, hey, I think I want to stop being a physical therapist and I want to be a guide. And so, I think there was some bewilderment on his part, like, wow, she's going climbing a lot. What's this about? What's this about? But then when I did finally say it out loud to my husband, and when he saw me come home from a day of climbing and saw the look on my face, which was just complete joy, he wanted that for me. And so he's been incredibly supportive, although
Nice.
a lot of times not understanding the world at all and having to just trust. But he's been just so supportive because he's seen the change that it's bringing in me, which is just this incredible joy, incredible engagement in life, excitement, energy, all of it. Like he just sees that I am happy and thriving in my new career, and he wants that for me. So he's been wonderful.
Nice. And how
Yeah.
about the kids?
The kids also were like, I was not doing what all the other moms were doing at all. And I think initially they were like, that's really strange. But now they're just so super proud. And one thing that was great, the awards ceremony was in Boulder, and my son lives in Denver. And so to have my 30-year-old son there, feeling so proud of me was just this incredible moment for me. To have him there and be able to take part in that and see the awards ceremony, and to feel how proud he was of me. And my daughter as well. My son isn't a climber, but my daughter is. So, so they're just proud, and, they're okay with the fact that I'm not like all the other moms, and that's okay.
And you said you're not like other moms. So that kind of come back to my question, when you were describing that you grew up, you just fell into this, maybe a trap that's saying, oh, this is the way that I'm supposed to do. And I'm not quite sure. I only know, I didn't grow up in the United States, so I don't know what exactly that is. So what kind of expectation?
Part of that might be cultural for the US, and part of that was certainly the time frame in which I grew up. I graduated high school in 83 and college in 87. And at that point, it was still very much the cultural expectation. And also within my family was you go to college, you get married, you have a family. That's just what you did. And I took that on, as many of us do, as take on the expectations of our culture and our family. And I did all those things. And I don't regret any of them. I love being married. I love being a mom. I love being a PT. But at some point, I kind of looked up and said, but what else is there? What else do I want to do? What part of me have I ignored or neglected? And that's when I remembered those young experiences when I was a kid of being in the mountains and remembering how incredibly free and joyful I felt. And then just making the decision to return to that. And then, so when my kids, and you ask about sort of the mom expectations as they got older, I think that we have been sold this narrative that with age, everything just gets harder. You get weaker. You're less fit. You can't do these things anymore, or you can't do that because you're too old. We've bought this narrative that has been served to us. And I want to encourage people to challenge that. And yeah, I'm not unrealistic. There are certain things that change as you age in your body. But I think there's a whole lot we're capable of beyond the narrative. I am stronger now than I was as a college level soccer player. I'm fitter now than I was then. I have to work hard at that, but it's possible. And that's why I'm trying really hard not to put limitations on myself. I like to say, I'll never be a climber who can climb 5 whatever. But I try to challenge that. Like, well, you don't know. You got to just try. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but don't just assume that you can't.
Yes.
And I saw that with a lot of the other moms of kids the same age as mine, where they were just sort of saying, well, I just can't do that anymore. And I say, why? Don't assume. Maybe you choose not to. That's a different thing. But to not do it because you think you can't is a really limiting belief pattern that I think we need to look beyond.
I love it. Yeah, because I also say, well, you should not say that until if you choose to do that, that's a different story, right? Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
And I'm not totally unrealistic. Like, I have to work really hard to keep my body in the state it needs to be in to do this work. But I enjoy that work, and I really enjoy what my body can do out there. And so I'm willing to put that time and effort in. It's not magic like it was when you were 20 and you could just do whatever. So I'm not unrealistic, but if you choose to do it, you are capable of a lot.
Yeah. Originally, I wanted to ask, like, because I think my podcast, some listeners, they have doubts, maybe because it's gender or maybe because they age or whatever reason. I can't list them all, but I wanted to ask you, what do you have to say to them? But I think that those were perfect. But anything that you want to add on that?
Yeah, just if there's something you want to do, break it down into what you need to be able to do that. Do you need skills, instruction, fitness, flexibility, strength? Break it down and then work on it. And just keep doing the next step. And before you know it, you're going to be way farther than you thought you would.
Awesome. And I try to also, I ask some questions at the end to wrap things up. I try to change things. So right now I have a new question.
Uh-oh.
Than other episodes.
Okay.
So what do you think is the best guide tool?
Listening.
Yeah, I love that. Listening.
Yeah.
And
listening to the environment, listening to the environment, listening to your guest, listening to your inner voice, listening.
Wow. Yeah, listening. You really can learn a lot from listening, and then you got a lot of information from there.
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Yeah. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. And anything I don't know. I mean, I always afraid I'm not asking the right and good questions. Anything you want to tell the audience?
Oh, no, I just, I think we've said it, but it's just sort of try to look beyond those self-imposed limiting beliefs. And I want to thank you for having me. And I definitely want to thank the guiding community for seeing me and valuing what I have to offer. Because as a woman aging in this culture, to get the message that you still matter and what you have to offer is important is a huge gift. And I wish that for all your listeners. And nice. I'm very grateful for it.
Nice. And in a way, I acknowledge that, but in another way, I wish that that should not be how should I say? I mean, Asian woman or whatever. I mean, I'm an Asian woman right now, and I don't really like. We should not even think that at one point we'll be valueless. Is that yeah?
I agree with you 100%. And I think what I would say is, this award is external validation of that, but I think to remind us or to listen and acknowledge that so much of our days when we're interacting with other people, they are seeing and valuing us and what we have to offer, and to just absorb that and just to reflect on that and take it in and know that our wisdom, our experience, our perspective, our groundedness, our centeredness is valuable and needed, and something that folks who are younger don't necessarily have yet. They haven't grown into that, and they desperately need models for that. And so whether you get the external validation or not, whether our culture values it or not on the whole, I think if we can remind each other at least how valuable it is and how important it is, that's a gift we can provide each other.
Awesome. That's also another type of good self-awareness.
Yeah.
Right? Like we need to value the values that we have.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And that's why like things like your podcast are so incredibly helpful, because you are centering all these voices and valuing them and putting them out there. And that's a huge gift that is needed, not just in the guiding world, but in the world in general. So well done.
Thanks. Yeah. And then people would know that we actually not just white guys, we have a lot of awesome female guys.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate it, Ting Ting. It's always great to see you.